the folks from Hyphn and Steelcase for being with us. And just for those of you that don't know, we partnered with Hyphn and Steelcase to do Hill Hub. So all of the beautiful furnishing, layout, design was brought to life by the folks at Hyphn and Steelcase. And so it's fabulous equipment, fabulous furniture. If you haven't been in Hill Hub, I would encourage you to do so. But I'm sure that they're going to be referring to Hill Hub, and that'll give you a reference point when you come in and visit us. So hope that you do so. I'm going to now at this point turn it over to Jimmy to introduce our presenters, and you guys can let folks know whether you want them to interrupt with questions or if you want to do it at the end, just how you want to manage that.
All right, great.
Jimmy,
thank you, Deanna. Appreciate it. Thanks
Thank
for having us on this call. I'm Jimmy Kwan with Steelcase. Steelcase, if you guys aren't familiar, we are a company that works to create great workspaces through architecture, furniture, and technology. And today I'm pleased to introduce our two experts on people and space. So we have Heather Leachman-Beck from Hyphn. She is the Director of Workplace Innovation, and she's great with working on the people side of the workplace. And then we also have Megan Hogue from Steelcase. She is our regional applications consultant, and she is our expert on space, utilizing space, and how to engage your employees. I know and why we're here today is talking about returning to the workplace. I believe Washington County is in phase 1 and moving to phase 2 pretty quickly. So we'd like to discuss today how you can do that to keep your people safe, make them feel safe, and then creating the great work environment to do their best work. So Heather, Megan, pass it off to you.
Thank you, Jimmy. So like Jimmy said, there is a lot going on right now, a lot of change going on. There's a lot of concentration on the near term in terms of what we can do with our spaces to make people feel safe to return to work. And given that, I want us to take a pause and make sure that we're doing the work to look into the future as well. With the amount of change that's going on in the world, with our workplaces, with us as individuals, there's an opportunity in this moment to be able to rewrite where we're going in the future. So if you haven't done the work around your mission, vision, and values as an organization, I really implore you to take this moment and figure out where you're going and how you're going to really holistically support your employees, so that in these decisions that you're making near term, in the near term future, they really apply to where you're going long term. So I know a lot of times as we're providing this information, and we will get to quite a bit of it, I know going from phase 1 to phase 2, there's a lot of information that you need, but I'm hopeful that we can take a moment to be very intentional about the choices that we're making as organizations, and that they create a positive change long into the future. So Megan is going to get into a lot more space details as we go, but we want to be able to have some interactive conversations with you right now. So these are going to be live polls, and we want to check in with you on where you're at. So in the chat message, I don't have chat open right now. There it is. Megan, if you could type in the web link for me, if everybody could click on the link that's going to be showing up in your Zoom chat. This will take you to a website for you to be able to answer this poll. You can also type in this pollev.com/Heather Leach 994. That's my name. And this is real time, give us an understanding of where your concerns are right now. And we're going to be talking to them quite a bit as we go through, but we want to see where you're at. So copy and paste the link that is in the chat message and put that into your browser. And this question should pop up for you to be able to put in your answer in real time. Your answer should be populating. So I'll give it a minute, because I know this is a bit of a new concept, but we found that real-time collaboration, specifically in this virtual world, makes it so that we can feel more connected and really be answering the questions that are coming up that people are having. So if you don't mind putting in where you're at, what your concerns are, so we can talk about them, we would greatly appreciate it. Collaboration, it's a good one. This is one of those, right? We're collaborating virtually, so how do you make this a better experience? And certainly anybody who's experienced Hill Hub knows that collaboration real time and in person is quite a bit better than Zoom. So spacing the office and interactions with the public, yeah, that is, we're going to get into some rules around that and to be able to help you through that. Certainly none of us on the call, Jimmy, Megan, and I, we don't have experience with the pandemic, but we're figuring out as we go with the information that we do have. Making sure you're properly spaced, absolutely, yep. I think any organization right now in terms of space, what does that look like? How do we make sure that we're following the CDC guidelines? What does that look like in space? And then how do we make sure the additional areas of health and well-being are being taken care of outside of physical space? Ability to work from home. Yes, we are all working remotely right now, and it's obviously we're all on the same platform, so it keeps it very inclusive. So I think adding in the layer of going from working from home into working from the office, and you have half and half, what is that going to look like? So those are great answers. Non-flexible workspace. Yes, some workspaces are making it very difficult to be able to re-enter. So we're gonna provide some information around that as well. And these slides that we're presenting to you, we're gonna send to you after the presentation to be able to look at. So this won't be the end of it.
Yep.
So
and there's some links too where, because we understand that this is a living document and the information changes really fast, we have some links to some Steelcase websites where we're updating this information continually with guidelines and all that. So
thank you, Megan.
Yeah,
and thank you everyone for sharing. So really what a lot of this comes down to is a conversation around safety. Reopening the economy, it's going to be different for it's going to be challenging for every company in different ways, and just like it's challenging for each individual in different ways. So regaining productivity and competitiveness, we all see that, I'm sure, is important, but we don't want to compromise health and safety. So we need to, I think, take a step back and use this time to really be able to concentrate on the health and well-being of our employees to be able to be impactful as we re-enter the workplace. So I'm curious, with this group, I know Washington County, I live in Multnomah County where we are still in lockdown, but in Washington County, you're in phase 1, entering phase 2. Where are you in the process, the group that's on this call? Are you already in the office? Are you thinking 1 month from now, 3 months from now? Where are you, so that we can kind of see, the differentials of where this group is at 6 to 9 months from now? Yeah, so the way we're framing this up is very much in the now, near, far. So where are you now? Where are you going near term, and where are you going long term? So 6 to 9 months from now, obviously, information is evolving and we're getting new information every day. So 6 to 9 months from now, we'll have very different information than we do in this current moment. So that's what's really been fascinating, is the rapid advancement of information and how we're adapting and evolving very quickly compared to how we did it in the past. So thank you for your responses. Obviously, quite a bit of a variation between the people that we're talking to. Some of you are in the office now, some of you are thinking a month out, and then some 6 to 9 months. And obviously it's a big variable. So we're going to be providing some guidelines around how do we do that from those different time points. So when it comes to safety, we can't just think about it from the lens of physical safety. Obviously, that's very important, and we're going to talk about barriers in division and how you create space to keep people physically safe. But this is more of a holistic perspective, and we need to also be thinking about cognitive and emotional safety. All of these 3 things go together to be able to, make sure that it's holistically we're taking care of safety. And with cognitive safety, I think that's when some people are like, I don't really understand what that is. And the way I'm thinking about it in this current point in time is there's our ability to concentrate on one thing at a time. From those of us that are working from home with, say, a child and are a teacher at the same time as being a full-time worker, which it feels impossible because it is impossible. Our brains can't do two things at once. So cognitive safety really gives you the ability to be able to like function mentally in the way that you need to be able to be fully productive and efficient and engaged and happy. And all of this obviously overlaps with the physical safety and the emotional safety. I think mental health in this given time when we're all, there was an HBR article that came out with like that feeling that you're having right now is grief. A lot of us are going through some very big feelings that we haven't gone through in the past, and how that overlaps the emotional, cognitive, and physical, and how they're all so incredibly intertwined. It's important for us to be thinking about, from an organizational perspective, how do we provide the support for our employees to be able to get through this experience, not just changing the space, but what are the additional tools and resources that people need to be able to get through this time. Certainly, you know, trust and connection and being able to have conversations around these important things is an excellent start. So I'm curious, I know Meg and I are both curious, if you are still working from home, what is the barrier that is keeping you there? What is the thing that's keeping you from going into the office? Is it safety? Is it physical safety? Is it, you know, that you can't because you're teaching a child at home and schools are closed? Is it that you're immunocompromised? What are the barriers that are keeping you from getting into work? It's because we're trying to have a holistic conversations, and you know, quite frankly, there are some problems that we can't solve, but we will do our best to be able to provide some guidelines on what are things that you need to be able to get into this, you know, phase 2 world. Physical distancing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one, you know, we'll have some guidelines on that. Megan is going to be providing some additional information on physical distancing. Honestly, that 6 feet circle is real helpful for us, you know, in the design world, to be able to put on a floor plan and figure out how many people can be in a room at the same time and keep people safe. Obviously, there's pathways and additional things that we'll talk about, but physical distancing is challenging. In certainly some physical spaces have different possibilities than others.
Yep, and all floor plates are different, and we're also considering things like how you get into the office. Like, are you taking public transportation? Like, are there elevators involved? So there's a layering approach. So
yeah, and so like unknown facts about the virus at first, certainly. We're seeing, Megan and I think both talk about this quite a bit, that there's a lot of wait and see right now, you know, of like, people are like, I don't know what's happening. I'd rather just like give it a minute before I figure out how to re-enter. So I think there is unknown facts. There's things that we don't know. And I think giving it time is definitely fair. Mm-hmm. And work from home for 9 years. Yeah, absolutely. I think in this moment in time, all of us feeling like we have choice and control, say if we are working from home, over what our experience is versus integrating with the rest of society and what that looks like when we have no control over what they're doing with their body and who they're integrating with and what practices they're following. So that is, that's a barrier that we've heard quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
So David in the chat says barrier is personal safety.
Personal safety. Yeah, I think, you know, from change management, when I talk about this with organizations, it's really about the individual's experience. Everybody is experiencing this change very differently from another individual, and safety is a very individual perspective. So what you need for personal safety is going to be very different from what another person needs. And what, you know, we're trying to make sure that we're doing is making sure that there's, you know, sort of this range of acceptance of this moment in time and making sure that people feel safe from one end to the other. And that's a very, very difficult task, right? And that's where protocols come in. And this is really sort of like the shared etiquette within an office. And I did a lot of work on protocols, and I know Megan did too, before the pandemic, of saying, you know, like, clean up the conference room after you're in the conference room, and don't do calls on speakerphone when you're out in the open office, and don't microwave stinky food, or fish specifically. These rules were just a little bit simpler to define pre-pandemic, and now it's shifting into a very different perspective of, whereas before it was sort of like a nice to have, some etiquette around the office and how we treat each other. It's shifted into, this is a health and safety question, and there's more of a moral obligation of people adopting these social behaviors to be able to keep other people within the office safe. And a lot of this goes back to that beginning conversation around mission, vision, and values, and who you are as an organization, and making sure that groundwork is laid in terms of how employees within your organization respect each other, and bringing that into the conversation around social behaviors and protocols, that it is really our job to respect each other, and uphold the values of the organization. And I think that's an easy way, not an easy way, it's certainly not easy to get everybody to respect each other. Certainly when we come from a perspective of being a little more individualistic and, siloed, shifting into a world where our actions really do affect the people around us. It's a different perspective, but I certainly think in terms of creating a more just and fair future for the workplace, I think it's really a beautiful thing. So I urge you to be having these questions about and thinking about what are the behaviors that need to be implemented within your physical space to be able to make sure that those physical changes that you are making are impactful, because they'll be kind of a moot point if you create barriers and you create physical distancing and you put in dividers, but you don't have the conversation around the behaviors that need to happen in connection with that. So that's where that, holistic cognitive, physical, and emotional safety comes together, is that we want to make sure that you're having those conversations as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who's going to be talking about a little more, a lot more details around what this looks like in physical space. And I think you all get a great amount out of her expertise. So Take it away, Megan.
Thanks, Heather. So before COVID happened, we were planning offices in ways where we were looking at open plan, right? A higher level of density per square foot, a lot of shared spaces, a higher level of mobility, communal spaces, and then layering on that nice residential aesthetic. And this was not wrong. We know through research and through observation that these types of offices really enable collaboration to happen. It enables us to create community within space and really develop those strong teams that enforce innovation. But now we have to layer on the approach of we're needing to design this in a safe way. And so that creates some tensions and some challenges. So when we start looking at this document, we're looking at it in the now, near, and far. And we know that even with the poll that we just took, that it's going to vary widely, and it's going to vary from business to business, different vertical markets, and even different geographies as we bring people back. But these are the three lenses, and we're going to look at some other lenses as well. But this is how we start to kind of break apart the phases of this. So if we click to the next slide, in this first wave, we're looking at the now, and it's exactly what we know with the science and what we know exactly right now. And so we're calling this a retrofit stage. So we're going to have to augment the stuff that's already within the office. And then we move to the near bucket. And this is where we start bringing more people back to the office. Maybe it's in shifts. Maybe it looks different for different organizations. Maybe it's at 50% capacity. Everything is kind of different, but we're going to know a little bit more about the science, and we're going to let data drive our decisions on how we start kind of slicing up that floor plate, what types of division we need to put in. And we're structuring this as the reconfigure stage. And then we move into the FAR, and that's where we have emergence of new technology, and we're reinventing what that workspace looks like. So if you click to the next slide, we'll start looking at how we start looking at the physical space. So we're really looking at density. So maintaining that 6-foot bubble. We're going to start seeing people perhaps meeting out in the open, because being within enclosed space, it's kind of hard to keep that 6-foot distance. And then leveraging furniture that's movable and flexible. And then also, we're going to see more own spaces. So where there was kind of hot desking or hoteling or benching, we're going to see those be residential spots where basically that's where the person's going to sit either for their day on, and they're going to sit there throughout the full day instead of maybe switching from spaces, so that we can maintain that kind of footprint. So if you click to the next slide, we're going to start looking at geometry. So here in the Northwest, we have this unique kind of challenge of where we're packing people into space pretty tightly. And so the reorientation of furniture may be challenging for some floor plates and walkways, but we are suggesting where we can turn desks, say like in a benching application, if we can flip that 90 degrees so that we can minimize the face-to-face contact, we're recommending that. And then separating desks to maintain that 6-foot bubble. And then the division. We understand that some division helps. So creating division where there's some like physical barriers, whether it's through screening, whether it's through elements of like say whiteboards. Like each time I talk to a client, even pre-COVID, what they always asked more for was whiteboards. So, and those movable whiteboards. So spaces that, or like the division that can do double duty even after COVID will be helpful. And then we understand that height helps. So really bringing up the height of those pieces of division. So then we're going to start looking at a couple floor plans. So when we were first approaching this, we needed to understand how we would slice up the average floor plate, how we would look at how people move throughout the space. So before, this is a typical floor plan on the left side of the screen. And then after is how we COVIDified the floor plan, right? How we layered in these applications of density, a division, and geometry.
Megan, did you just create a new word?
I did, Jimmy.
Oh.
So I've been using that just because I don't know what else to call it, right? When we're layering in these types of applications. So that's a Megan Hogue original. So in this floor plan, we're going to start looking at the density, and a lot of workplaces have work cafes or break rooms or spots where people can meet. And on the left in that green square there is an example of how it looked like before. And then on the right-hand side, we start taking out seats. So that's the main way how we're kind of de-densifying. So we're using a checkerboard pattern to reduce the face-to-face interactions, and the circles around the chairs, those represent a 6-foot bubble. So maintaining that 6-foot distance all around the area. And so reducing things that were used to be a 4-top table into a 2-top, and tables that were a 2-top into a single top. That's going to be key in this phase. So then we're going to look at the next slide, where we're going to look at the geometry of the space. So in the lower left-hand corner, we're looking at a benching application. And then in the lower left-hand corner of the after, we start to move those desks 90 degrees to reduce the face-to-face contact. We're using some layers of possibly division or storage to get people away from each other, and making sure that we're maintaining that 6-foot bubble around everyone. And then in the next slide, we're going to look at the division piece. So we're taking in the lower left-hand corner, those 4 benching applications. We're breaking one of those benches into the application that we saw on the prior slide, but we're also in the spaces above there, we're looking at how we're breaking apart desks, how we're adding in perhaps like lockers to maybe show a traffic flow. And we're adding some freestanding screens to provide some sort of protection from somebody's back and side so that you can always see who's approaching you. So in the next slide, oh, we have a new poll.
We've got a poll.
We have a poll. So when planning for your space, after kind of hearing those lenses, what are you guys thinking of having as far as what lens are you using for your return to office? I see 2 or more of the above.
I mean, they're all good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Choose all 3.
Yeah.
That looks like the popular answer.
Yeah. So using those strategies where we have multiple ways to do it, whether it's the reduction of density or adding in layers of division, I think that those are going to be key. And really thinking about how you move throughout your space, maybe creating some one-way streets so that it's not a face-to-face interaction, and thinking about bottlenecks where things perhaps could get a little tight and maybe less than that 6 foot bubble for everyone. So really looking at the holistic picture. So if we click to the next slide, we're going to focus on some applications of the retrofit. So in this stage, a lot of us are here right now where we're having to use a common sense approach to prevent the spread, and we're going to have to adhere to the guidelines. So the physical distancing, using barriers, and also the cleaning protocols and the safety measures that we have to layer onto our space. So in the next slide, we're going to look at the reduction of density. So using a checkerboard method and maintaining that 6 foot distance. I also like the idea of giving visual cues to show non-occupied spaces. So taking away the chair, taking away the technology, maybe adding some tape, the caution tape, or some other methodologies of, I have a client who, instead of the caution tape where that appears a little scary, right? They're layering in plants. So if you see a plant on a desk, it means don't use it, but it's a way to just kind of make it a little bit nicer.
Much more soothing.
Much more soothing, exactly. And then layering on divisions. So having things like screens that are attached to desks, having those mobile whiteboards, dividing people with the 6 foot distance, maybe adding freestanding screens so that you're allowing a directional flow around desks. And then adding things where we have a change in geometry. So if you can change that desk 90 degrees, adding some division, or adding some things where we're reorienting that traffic flow into the workstations. So on the next slide, we're also going to see a shift from desks being hoteling desks to more own desks. And then we're going to use that same gym policy of we're using a clean in and we're using a clean out. So having that PPE available to employees in kind of a repeatable way near those spots. So we're calling them like sanitation stations, safety stations, having spots where those are close so that people are able to wipe in, wipe out, just like at the gym, how we do those treadmills and ellipticals. And then ancillary spaces. So I feel like I'm always getting asked about ancillary spaces and how do we make them COVIDified, right? And so having spots where we can separate. So if you have a modular sofa, breaking those apart, adding layers of tables to maintain that 6 foot radius, adding plants and screening. Screening is key when say the sofa or that ancillary application is on a main pathway, using that screening so that people aren't coming up on the sides or the backs of people so that you can see people approaching. And then also using things where I love the idea of an open storage piece so that it's less touch points so that the PPE isn't in a drawer or hid behind a door. So that you use less of your hands and you can reach right in. And then at this stage, working from home, we're doing it right now. this is going to continue to be a norm. And so, and we understand that some employees are going to be working from home longer than expected. So they may require some ergonomic furniture or some things to help augment their work from home experience. And then in the next slide, we're going to start looking at providing those visual cues, just like that plant or the police tape. Think about things that indicate the 6-foot bubble, or do not enter zones, or signage about hand washing or directional patterns on the floor. We're seeing this in grocery stores and other stores. So amplifying that strategy in your workplace will be key. So we're kind of learning these visual cues. And then the idea of smaller meetings. So it's the de-densification. So once was an 8-person conference room, that's now going to be a 4-person conference room. Perhaps splitting tables apart, removing chairs, indicating to not sit in that chair so that we maintain the 6-foot bubble. Also thinking about how you get into the room and out of the room. One client has been talking about basically if you're the first person in the room, you go to the furthest point, then the next person goes to the next closest point, and there, and then when they leave, then the first person who entered a room is the first person out, so that they're using perhaps a clockwise motion to get in and out of the room, so we're not crossing paths to get in and out. And then make your cleaning frequent and make it visible. So you're going to provide a level of the psychological safety if everyone is communicated with the same of what the cleaning expectations are, both as an organization but also as an individual, and making it frequent and visible. And then mask wearing is going to become the norm. And so making certain companies, it's a policy to wear masks when you enter into the facility and if you're working all day. So this is going to continue to be a norm at this stage. Okay, so I think it's poll time again.
It's poll time.
Yes. In one word, what do you miss most about the office? Yeah, the community, the people, the interacting, it's really hard to be across the screen and not be in a room with people, for sure. Quiet. That's interesting. Yeah. People, yeah. Yeah, the collaboration, I feel like has been a huge topic of like, how are we collaborating effectively with people, and how do we get that level of collaboration that we were experiencing when we were in person. I've heard that that's a big barrier, so, or things that we miss, so. Okay, so then we're going to move on to the reconfigure stage. So this is where we're ready to bring back a larger percentage of the workforce. And we have a little bit of knowledge, we have some data, and this is really going to drive where we go. So we have some indicators of what that might look like. So in the reconfigure stage, we're going to start looking at the we with, or the me within we. So spaces that once were perhaps collaborative spaces, those may change into more of a me personal type space, say an enclave or a private office. Those may switch. Also, if those spaces need to be shared, they're going to be able to be reservable. And then making sure that it's cleanable, wiping everything down. And then when we start to augment this workplace, and perhaps we're ordering new things or thinking about new chairs or panels or things like that, we're going to have a mind towards designing it for disinfecting. So making sure that those vertical surfaces, they're wipeable, making sure that we're using things like a bleach cleanable fabric. Those are things that we're going to design towards. And then the introduction of fabric barriers, hard surfaces that are scientifically proven to deflect the virus. And then we're really going to use and have a mind towards flexible furniture. So furniture and spaces that can do the double duty, can expand and contract with how many users are using it. I love this application because the 3 people could move all this stuff to create an open meeting area. They have the digital technology, they have whiteboards, they can approach it from 3 different directions and not cross paths, and it could be adjacent to, say, a work area. So adding furniture that could be movable and flexible will really start to see this trend in new workspaces. Also, so then if we click to the next slide, we'll start to see the addition, if we haven't already seen this, of large-scale collaborative devices. This will become even more important because right now we're all at a disadvantage with how we're collaborating right now. We're all on a little tiny thumbnail. We're all looking through a Zoom screen, right? And we're all on that same playing field. When we get back to the office, we need to make sure that we're maintaining those relationships, we're maintaining full inclusion, and we're still going to need that collaboration piece that leads to innovation. So platforms like this will begin to expand, and the use of these devices where everyone can interact in a fair way will be needed. And then the introduction of standing meetings. So using standing meetings to make the meeting shorter, perhaps in the open, and then making sure that we're not stuck inside 4 walls for an extended amount of time. And then using things like agile practices. So using those sprints, using ways to make the work visible to teams that are in the office, but also out of the office. And using the square footage to leverage teams. And then contact tracing. So this is going to become more widespread. That platform is going to become more useful. The data that we drive from contact tracing, we'll know what to do with it. So if you become ill or one of your colleagues, we'll be able to contact each other to understand where the virus has gone and where it might go. And if you click to the next slide. Okay, so then this is in the reinvent stage. So this is where we're seeing these kind of low level tones of where it could go. We're still trying to understand the science. We're still trying to understand where it might be shifting, but we understand that the planning paradigms, they are going to change, and we're going to shift from kind of a density cost model to something where we're bringing teams together, and we're going to have to reinvent the office based on science and the emerging technologies in this stage.
It's poll time.
So what, yeah, poll time. So what's something that you're excited about for the future as it pertains to office and workplace? A vaccine. I think we're all very excited for what it looks like post-vaccine and how that starts to shift what workplace looks like. Is it going to go back to what we know and what we've been doing, or has this work from home experiment, is this going to shift how we fundamentally work in the future? Work from home opportunities. We're a part of this weird social experiment where a lot of companies who said, we absolutely cannot work from home, their people are working from home now. So it's kind of disproven the myth, but we understand that space matters. And I think we've proved that even more, like with the social interactions, the lunches with coworkers, meetings smaller and shorter may be more productive. So understanding the frequency and cadence of meetings and being able to make them shorter and more condensed. I think is interesting.
And that really aligns with the agile practices that you were referencing earlier with the short sprints of, morning stand-up meetings, people connecting and keeping, meetings to shorter and more productive. I think we found in this time, we maybe don't need to have as many meetings as we did pre-pandemic.
For sure. Okay, so in the future and in this reinvent stage, we're really going to see a designing for adaptability, flexibility. These planning paradigms, they need to be flexible, and it should no longer be designed for permanent a solution, so that our teams can grow and contract as the project needs change, as we become a little bit more agile. So the space needs to work with the teams and for the teams. And then the emergence of hands-free technology. So things like our Rise app. So we already have an app that basically you can click on it and it can raise and lower a height adjustable desk based on user preference. We're going to see this technology happening even more. So automatically opening doors, things where voice activated technology, where we can bring up presentations on the screen with just the sound of our voice. This technology is going to become a greater platform, and we're going to see more use of it so that we're not having to touch things. And then the use of materials. So emerging technologies where we're looking at the chemical makeup of how that textile or how that laminate or how that metal reacts to the virus protection. And this will become a standard over time, and the material look of it will change too. So this technology will continue to emerge. And then sensors, the use of sensors. So we currently already use some layering of sensors to understand possibly utilization or where there's an available spot, but the emergence of sensors will become heightened so that we understand not only the usage, but possibly the overusage of a room, maybe the cleaning cadence. If a room is being overused, right? Maybe we need more cleaning protocols in place. Also, if you go into a space, knowing where to go that is maybe not as occupied, so that you can get that the social distance around you. So having those things visible and in real time will be key in the future. And then inclusive design. So ensuring that everyone has equal levels and safe levels of participation, whether they're working from home or they're in the space, making sure that everyone can use the space on equal platforms will be key. And like, I love this rendering of basically it's like a little neighborhood. So whether you're at home, you have a spot to come into and you know your team is there, and maybe that's where all your stuff is, but everything's kind of on this equal and level playing field. And then living on video. I feel like I've never been on so many video calls in my entire life, and this platform is going to only expand. So use of things like cool backgrounds like Heather has of like the Northern Lights, and things where there's multiple tiles. The emergence of and technology of this expanding platform will only be enhanced as we go further, because there are going to be people still working from home. Work from home is not going to go away. We've done the social experiment and it's worked for a lot of people. So we're going to see a lot more fluidity between working from home policies in the future. And with that it creates a new challenge of if we're living on video and we're working from home, or part of our team is working from home, how do we create a strong community within our workplace? And I like to say we either create culture by default, or we can design culture, right? So what pieces of your culture do you want to take with you, and how do we enhance that on a digital platform? So making sure that the long-term strategies and vision of an organization is met through a digital platform. So then if we click to the next slide,
Yes.
How do we all do this? Like, who do we go to, right?
Exactly. So just to clarify that Megan works for Steelcase, I work for Hyphn. Hyphn is a dealer partner to Steelcase. So any of the examples that Megan showed, if you want to purchase any of those items, you purchase it from Hyphn, and we get those from Steelcase. So I'm very grateful to work for Hyphn. I'm very grateful to work with Steelcase. It's a partnership that I haven't experienced before, and I think just the integration of our two organizations really has been impactful for our clients and really to elevate the work that we're doing now and well into the future. So as Megan was kind of going through these different things we were talking about at the beginning, there's really 3 buckets that we concentrate on at Hyphn, and these 3 buckets came from Steelcase of people, places, and technology. And those 3 things working together is really what makes a workplace extremely successful. From the lens of technology, what we're doing at Hyphn is we have some different items here that are for like the COVID re-entry, right? There are things that we did pre-pandemic. There are things that we're doing now to be able to help organizations to move back. And these are some additional items to be thinking about in the technology bucket. So if you're making any adjustments to your workspace, certainly be thinking about how technology integrates with that. We can help with shifting some of your technology to being voice activated, so it's like touchless. Health monitoring, if you need temperature check devices, that's something that we can assist with. And then space planning and making sure that, you know, if you want to add sensors to your space to make sure that people are using them in the way that you have set out, that's also something that we can do by using Steelcase products. And then next is place. This is what, you know, Hill Hub is a location that we helped create along with Steelcase, and yet, as any of you have experienced that, you can see that the work that we're capable of. But what that looked like before versus what that looks like now versus what that'll look like in the future are very different things. There are things that we can do to be able to help you through that. Certainly the lenses that Megan was expressing in terms of division and barriers and, you know, separating workstations, etc. We can help with that in terms of creating floor plans and reconfiguring your furniture to be able to make it work through this period of time. Then also helping with sanitation and collaboration, and how do you collaborate with what you have to be able to work for now and then into the future. And lastly, this is my bucket, which is the people bucket, which obviously I'm most excited about. A lot of the work that I do is in change management, and we talked about earlier with the protocols. A lot of these behaviors that we're asking people to do, they don't have a very good understanding of how to do them. So kind of creating experiences for people to be able to adopt these behaviors with behavioral boot camps of trying these experiences out, showing what that looks like, doing it together and writing those rules together so that it can be adopted. You know, create that muscle memory so when they go into the space, they understand what clean in, clean out means, what that looks like, where the tools are to be able to do that. These are very, very new experiences in the workplace. I don't think any of us expected this to be happening, but here we are. So creating the tools and resources to be able to make this as easy as possible to be able to adopt the changes that are going on. And if you do, you know, you are going through re-entering the workspace, I would urge you to be surveying your employees, checking out where they are to be able to fill in the gaps of where to go in the future, gathering that information and being as transparent as possible about what you're doing as an organization to help support them through that. That's certainly something that we can help do for you of, you know, deploying a survey, gathering the information and providing information about how to move forward. And working from home resources, that, as Megan said, that's going to continue. So how do you make that? Maybe now it's been a little bit of a patchwork thing that you've done, but how do you create protocols around that to make that experience inclusive with, say, those that are re-entering the workplace, making sure that there's commonalities between working from home and working in an office. And then communication. Communication is of the utmost importance right now, right? Being very transparent on what messaging that you're sending to your employees, certainly from like the executive level and from the mid-level manager level, and being very intentional with the things that you're sharing and how you're sharing them. There's some things that should be on a video platform if you can't be together in person and need to be more face-to-face. And there's some things that can go in an email. We can help with that in terms of creating a communication plan around office reentry and what are the most important steps to be talking about and planning for and communicating about. And then lastly, with your leadership, making sure that your leadership is being very intentional with mission, vision, and values, and figuring out where you're going in your future, and where you are with your culture, and aligning that with all of the decisions that you're making in the current point in time. So if any of those things, we're going to be sending this to you after the presentation. If there's things that you want to be able to connect with us on these different activities, we're happy to help. Just kind of wanted to give a real quick overview of what those things are, because sometimes people are like, what does that look like? But certainly wanted to be able to leave an opportunity for questions for Megan and I to hear where you're at, if there's any additional information that we can provide to you after this presentation. So I'm going to open the floor. That was some rapid talk in there.
And there's also this link at the bottom, steelcase.com/post-COVID. That's where we're updating Steelcase information, research, and insights around COVID, so, and how it pertains to workplace.
And I would definitely urge everybody to go to that. And we've sent it to so many of our clients, and it's been useful. It's very clear and laid out of the individual steps to take. I think I've read, 150 documents of office reentry, and some of them are very overwhelming. And I think what this is, it lays out a clear plan in the now near future, and some steps that you can take without, reinventing the wheel or, readjusting what you already have. We all have the capacity to be able to make these changes. It's just not changes we all ever thought we were going to be making. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. This is super awesome and a bit overwhelming. I was taking a ton of notes for Hill Hub and texting some folks along the way about, we need to think about this and we need to figure out these things. My question is around conference rooms. Are there, and it's probably more of like a county or state question than a Hyphn+Steelcase question of like, how many people, if the conference room table seats 10, it should seat half of that, or is it about like the size of the table, or is it about the size of the chairs? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's generally around the density of the room. So
okay.
if it's a 10-person conference room, perhaps thinking about reducing that capacity to half. Also, where that technology is and where points of interaction could be. So think about those bottlenecks. Think about how you move around that conference room. Those are all things that we need to start to think about. The entry and the exit of how people enter and exit a conference room, and then also the cleaning cadence. How often? How visible is it? And also ways of the materiality of the table. Are we cleaning it in the right way? Is it wood? Is it laminate? Is it metal? Is it glass? There's all kinds of things, and those have some different cleaning methodologies around there. So I'd encourage you, we have a whole site on the COVID page around materiality. So I would encourage you guys to go check that out, because it all varies.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So in terms of protocols, you might want to consider having 45-minute meetings or 50-minute meetings instead of an hour, right? So you have an extra 10 minutes to clear out the room, clean whatever you can clean. Those are things, in addition to the physical space and the physical object, got to change behaviors as well. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Jimmy.
It's just a good practice in general. Give people a chance.
Right? Until you walked into those conference rooms before, and it was like, that seems from like 3 months ago. Yeah. I think Deanna is dispensing hand sanitizer. Anybody else on the call have questions? If you want to chime in, jump off a mute and shoot your questions out, or if you want to throw it in the chat, and we can talk about that too. Thanks everyone for being so chatty today. No, this has been great.
Awesome.
I work from home, and so it's kind of a different point of view for me. I rock my buoy from Steelcase that I love so much, and my up and down desk, but I'm excited to get back to Hill Hub and interact with other people at a safe distance, and making sure that things are all clean and protocols are being followed. So I'm excited to see what we do and what other offices around town do as we are re-entering and heading into phase 2 on the 22nd, hopefully, where we can start to return to the workplace. So any questions? Any other comments from anyone? This is your chance. The experts are right here. Unmute yourself, ask your questions.
We will also provide contact information if you feel
Awesome.
like sending an email to make it.
Perfect. Yeah, that's always the case, right? Like as soon as we hang up in 10 minutes, we'll have 5 more questions. So awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been incredibly helpful. So grateful for your time and your expertise today on this topic that is so overwhelming.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
We're all in it together, so we're